There is a moment that comes to every person, usually late at night, usually when the house is quiet and the noise of the day has finally stopped talking over your thoughts. A moment when you catch a glimpse of a version of yourself you have spent years trying not to look at. Maybe it is the anger you swallowed so many times it turned into silence. Maybe it is the ambition you were taught to call arrogance. Maybe it is the boundary you never set, the no you never said, the part of you that wanted more, felt more, need more, and was told again and again to shrink. That moment is not a malfunction. That moment is a doorway, and what lies behind it is not something to fear. It is something to finally meet. Tonight I am not here to hand you a set of tricks to manipulate the people around you, and I am not here to teach you how to win by making someone else lose. That is not power. That is a costume worn by people who never learned the difference between being respected and being feared, between being high value and being hollow. What I want to talk to you about is something older than any manipulation tactic, something that does not need a script, because it comes from a place so honest that once you find it, you stop needing to perform for anyone ever again. I want to talk to you about the parts of yourself you have been avoiding, and why meeting them honestly and without flinching is the single most transformative thing you will ever do for your confidence, your relationships, your presence in a room, and your peace of mind. Every one of us carries a hidden half, not evil, not broken, hidden. From the time we are children, we learn very quickly which parts of us are rewarded, and which parts get us punished, ignored, or laughed at. A child who cries and is told to stop crying learns to hide sadness. A child who gets angry and is told they are being dramatic learns to hide anger. A child who is too loud, too much, too sensitive, too ambitious, too different, learns to fold that part of themselves up small and tuck it somewhere out of sight, somewhere even they eventually forget to look. And here is the tragedy of it. We do not just hide the parts of us that cause harm. We hide the parts of us that could have been our greatest gifts. We hide our anger, which could have become our sense of justice. We hide our pride, which could have become our self-respect. We hide our desire, which could have become our drive. We hide our fear, which could have become our wisdom. We do not get rid of these things. We only push them underground and underground, unattended, unloved, and unexamined. They do not disappear. They wait. This is the quiet tragedy that plays out in millions of lives every single day. Brilliant, capable people who spend their entire existence performing a version of themselves that is palatable, agreeable, small, safe, while the most powerful, most magnetic, most authentic parts of who they are sit locked away in a room they were taught never to enter. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted. They wonder why they feel invisible in rooms full of people. They wonder why respect seems to come so easily to others and so painfully slow to them. The answer is almost never that they lack ability. The answer is that they have spent their life negotiating with only half of themselves, while the other half, unexamined, unintegrated, leaks out sideways, in resentment, in people-pleasing that curdles into bitterness, in outbursts that surprise even them, in a persistent sense that something inside is being wasted. I want you to understand something clearly, because this is the foundation of everything I am about to say. The parts of yourself that you have rejected are not your enemy. They are simply undeveloped. They are raw material. Anger unexamined becomes cruelty, but anger understood becomes the fuel of conviction. Pride unexamined becomes arrogance, but pride understood becomes the quiet dignity that makes other people trust you without needing to ask why. Desire unexamined becomes obsession or shame, but desire understood becomes the engine that gets you out of bed with a reason. The raw material was never the problem. The problem was that no one ever taught you how to work with it instead of running from it. High value is not a costume you put on. It is not a set of postures, or a way of talking, or a collection of psychological tricks you deploy on other people to make them feel small enough that you feel tall. Real high value, the kind that walks into a room and does not need to announce itself, the kind that people feel before they can explain why, comes from wholeness. It comes from a person who is no longer at war with themselves. Think about the people you have met in your life who carried themselves with a certain unshakable calm, who did not need to raise their voice to be heard, who did not need to put others down to feel tall, who could sit in silence without feeling the urge to fill it, who could hear criticism without collapsing and hear praise without inflating. Those people were not born that way. They built that. And they built it, almost without exception, by doing the very thing I am inviting you to do tonight, They stopped running from the parts of themselves the world told them to be ashamed of, and they turned around and they looked. This is not about becoming ruthless. This is not about learning to read people so you can exploit them, or learning to charm so you can extract what you want and disappear. That approach might get you short-term wins, but it will cost you the one thing that no manipulation tactic can ever buy: the ability to trust yourself. A person who manipulates others is, in the end, a person who does not trust their own, worth enough to ask directly for what they want. Real power does not need to hide. Real value does not need to trick anyone into seeing it. What I am describing to you is the opposite of manipulation. It is honesty turned inward first, so that by the time it reaches other people it does not need to twist or perform. It simply is. So let us talk about what it actually means to face the hidden half of yourself, because this is not some abstract spiritual idea floating in the clouds. This is something you can start doing today, in the middle of your very ordinary, very real life. It starts with noticing what triggers you. Not the big obvious things, the small ones. The comment that stings more than it should. The person who just rubs you the wrong way for no reason you can explain. The trait in someone else that makes your blood boil on sight. Here is something almost nobody tells you, because it is uncomfortable to hear. The things that irritate us most intensely in other people are very often a mirror held up to the parts of ourselves we have refused to look at. The colleague whose confidence annoys you might be reflecting back your own unclaimed confidence. Sitting locked in a room you stopped visiting years ago. The friend whose bluntness offends you might be reflecting back your own unspoken truths, the ones you have swallowed so many times you forgot you were even swallowing them. This is not about blaming yourself for your reactions, it is about getting curious about them. Curiosity, not judgment, is the key that opens this door. The moment you ask, with real gentleness, "What is this reaction showing me about myself?" you have already begun the most important work of your life. Then comes the harder part, sitting with what you find, without immediately trying to fix it, suppress it, or perform it. Our instinct, when we find something uncomfortable inside us, is to either shove it back down or swing wildly in the other direction and let it run the show unchecked. Neither of those is integration. Suppression is where we have been living our whole lives, and we already know where that leads. Exhaustion, resentment, a self that feels like a stranger. But overcorrection is not the answer either. The person who spent years being too passive does not become whole by becoming cruel. The person who spent years being too rigid does not become whole by abandoning all structure. Integration is not swinging from one extreme to the other. It is standing in the middle, fully aware of both your light and your shadow, and choosing consciously which one the moment calls for. This is what emotional intelligence actually is underneath all the buzzwords. It is not smiling more, it is not saying the right calming phrase in a meeting. It is the capacity to feel something fully, anger, jealousy, fear, desire, grief, without being ruled by it and without pretending it is not there. Most people live at one of two extremes. Either they are ruled by their emotions, blown around by every gust of feeling like a door left unlatched in the wind, reacting before they have even had a chance to understand what they are reacting to. Or they have gone numb, having spent so many years suppressing what they feel that they no longer have access to it at all, mistaking their numbness for maturity, their disconnection for peace. Neither of these is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence lives in the narrow, disciplined space between feeling everything and controlling nothing. It is the art of being fully human without losing your footing. And here is where the real transformation happens, the part that changes not just how you feel, but how the world responds to you. When you stop being afraid of your own anger, you stop needing other people to avoid making you angry. When you stop being ashamed of your own ambition, you stop needing to downplay your success to make others comfortable. When you stop hiding your desires, you stop resenting the people who seem to get what they want while you silently wait for permission. Every part of yourself you integrate is a rope that used to bind you, and now does not. And when those ropes fall away, one by one, something happens that no technique could ever manufacture. You become someone who does not need anyone's approval to know their own worth. And paradoxically, that is exactly the kind of person other people find themselves drawn to respect. Think about why we respect certain people instinctively, without being able to fully articulate why. It is rarely because they are the loudest in the room. It is rarely because they have the most polished words or the most rehearsed presence. It is because something about them feels solid, unshaken, congruent. What you see is what is actually there, no gap between the performance and the person. That congruence, that alignment between the inside and the outside, is not something you can fake for long. People sense incongruence even when they cannot name it, which is why so much manipulation eventually collapses, because underneath the charm, something does not add up, and the nervous system of the person across from you knows it before their conscious mind does. But when a person has done the work of meeting their own shadow, integrating it, understanding it, there is nothing left to hide. There is no gap for people to sense. There is just a whole person standing in the open, and that openness is magnetic in a way no manipulation tactic could ever replicate. I want you to think about the areas of your life where you feel the smallest, where you shrink, where you find yourself over-apologizing, over-explaining, asking for permission you do not need. You to ask yourself honestly, what part of me did I learn to silence in order to be accepted here? Was it my voice, my anger at being treated unfairly, my desire to be seen, my right to take up space? These are not flaws you need to overcome by becoming someone harder or colder. They are simply unclaimed inheritance. They have been waiting for you this entire time, patiently, in the room you stopped visiting. Reclaiming them does not mean becoming reckless. A person who has done real inner work does not suddenly start lashing out at everyone who ever wronged them, does not suddenly become selfish in the name of finally putting myself first. That is not integration. That is just moving from one imbalance to another, from suppression to indulgence, which is exhausting in its own way, and just as far from wholeness. True integration is quieter than that. It looks like finally being able to say no without a 3-paragraph apology attached to it. It looks like feeling anger rise in your chest during an unfair conversation, and instead of swallowing it or exploding, using it as information. This matters to me. This crossed a line. I am allowed to address this calmly and directly. It looks like wanting something. A promotion, a relationship, a level of respect, and being able to say so plainly, without dressing the desire up in false modesty, because you were taught that wanting things openly makes you difficult. This is the deepest secret hiding underneath every conversation about high value and dark psychology and power that you will find scattered across the internet. The secret that most of those conversations miss entirely. The most powerful people are not the ones who have learned to read and exploit the psychology of others. The most powerful people are the ones who have finally stopped needing anything from anyone because they have gone inward and reclaimed what they were missing themselves. When you no longer need external validation to feel whole, you stop being predictable in the way manipulators love to exploit. The fear of rejection, the hunger for approval, the desperate need to be liked, because you have already given yourself the thing you used to be chasing from everyone else. That is not a trick, that is freedom. And freedom, worn quietly and without announcement, is the most respected quality a human being can carry. I also want to speak honestly about the discomfort of this process. Because I do not want to sell you a fantasy, where you simply decide to integrate your shadow one afternoon, and wake up the next morning as an entirely different person. This work is slow, it is humbling. There will be moments where you see something in yourself you do not like. A pettiness, a fear, a wound you thought you had already dealt with, still raw underneath the surface. That discomfort is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are doing it at all. Growth that does not occasionally humble you is usually not growth. It is just a new performance. The old self, the one built entirely out of what was acceptable to show the world, will resist. It has kept you safe, in its limited way, for a long time, and some part of you will be afraid to let it go, even when you know it is no longer serving you. Be patient with that fear. It is not weakness. It is simply the last guard standing at a door you are finally strong enough to open yourself. And here is something important. This journey is not about becoming perfect, and it is not about becoming hard. Some people hear the word shadow and imagine they need to become cold, unfeeling, strategic, detached from empathy in the name of strength. That is a complete misunderstanding of the work, and honestly, it is the exact opposite of what wholeness looks like. The most integrated people I have ever known are not the coldest people in the room. They are often the warmest, because they are no longer spending all their energy managing their own hidden fears, which means they finally have energy left over to actually see other people clearly, to listen without needing to perform listening to care, without needing anything back. Compassion without self-honesty curdles into people-pleasing, but self-honesty without compassion curdles into cruelty. What you are working toward is not one or the other. It is both, together, held at the same time, a person strong enough to be gentle and honest enough to be kind without losing themselves in the process. So if you take one thing from tonight, let it be this. Stop treating the uncomfortable parts of yourself like enemies to be defeated. Anger is not your enemy. Pride is not your enemy. Desire, ambition, fear, jealousy, none of these are your enemy. Your enemy, if you have one at all, is the exhausting decades-long habit of pretending these things do not exist inside you, a habit that costs you your authenticity every single day you keep it up. The moment you stop pretending, the moment you finally turn around and look directly at the parts of yourself you were taught to be ashamed of, something remarkable begins. You start to feel lighter, because you are no longer spending your energy holding a mask in place. You start to feel steadier, because there is nothing left hiding that could catch you off guard. You start to feel, for what might be the first time in your adult life, entirely and unapologetically like yourself. This is what true respect is built on. Not fear, not tricks, not the careful management of other people's perceptions. It is built on the quiet, unshakable presence of someone who has done the work of meeting every part of who they are, and has decided, deliberately, to keep the parts worth keeping and grow the parts worth growing, without needing to erase or hide any of it. That kind of person does not need to convince anyone of their value, because their value is no longer a performance. It is simply the truth of who they have become. You already carry everything you need for this. You do not need a script, a set of tactics, or a way to outmaneuver the people around you. You need honesty. You need patience with yourself. You need the courage to sit, quietly, with the parts of you that have been waiting in the dark. Not to punish them, not to indulge them, but to finally understand them. That is where real power lives. Not in controlling others, but in no longer being a mystery to yourself. Walk toward that. Slowly, honestly, without fear. What waits for you on the other side is not darkness at all. It is simply the rest of who you already are.